Hello again, everybody. This is Cam Garrity. Welcome back to This Should Have Been a Phone Call. And this time I'd really mean welcome back. It's been almost 2 years since an episode of this show came out. There was an abundance of work and life that just got in the way of me producing a podcast. But I'm excited to be back with monthly episodes that are a bit longer, all of which I really think will allow Phone Call to be a more manageable creative endeavor to sustain and to share with all of you. Now, because I never intended to go on a 2-year hiatus, that means that I've been sitting on a couple conversations that never saw the light of day, one of which is today's chat with Fergie Philippe. Fergie is a writer, director, actor, musician, all-around Renaissance man who, at the time of our recording in February 2022, was on Broadway doing double duty in a little indie called Hamilton, an American Musical. You may have heard of it. He was starring as both Hercules Mulligan and James Madison. But since then, he was also a member of Broadway's original revival cast of Camelot, which featured an incredible revised book by Aaron Sorkin. And he also regularly works with 54 Below, performing in and directing some amazing star-studded musical reviews. Now, I personally know Fergie from the puppetry world. He's also a very talented puppeteer and fellow Muppet fan. We are both very much 90s kids, as you'll hear us bond over things like Nicktoons and Elmo-Palooza. And he and I have actually never had the pleasure of meeting in person, though you'd never know it to hear us talk to each other. I love any chance to sit down with him and raise a glass to the magic and imagination that shaped both of our stories. This should have been a phone call with my founding father, Fergie Philippe.
The last time we talked was the pandemic. It's still the pandemic.
Yeah.
That was that a year ago? No way.
Yeah, it was. I think the episode came out in April of last year, so it's
we
probably
talked in,
around this time that
February-ish.
we were talking.
That's
February, March.
That's insanity. Wow. Because I don't know. I don't remember if I told you guys this, but I found you guys during the pandemic because I just was looking for every 4 months. I'll give it time and I'll start looking up different people to see if they've done new interviews. And yours was one of the only ones that Steve had done an interview for. And I hadn't heard Steve do an extended interview in a long while. Steve Whitmire, for those who might be listening. And so I was really not only was I blown away that there was an interview, but it was also on video. And so I was just I've actually never heard of these guys because I do feel like extended puppet podcasts are kind of a new thing now. And so then I just went on a insane deep dive for the rest of the pandemic. So then a year later to be on the show, it truly was one of those truly full circle great experiences. But when we last talked, I had no idea when I was going back to work. And
we didn't know when any of us were going to be doing anything normal.
Right.
Some of us were lucky enough to be working from home, but it was, the vaccines hadn't even really been rolled out yet. So
That's right. That's right. It's so crazy to think about a time when I was going out and seeing people cautiously without vaccines. That is a wild thing to think about. It's obviously been insanely different because of all the things with COVID and everything that we've been dealing with. But what's been especially interesting is that, and I'm mindful of how I speak about any practices that involve the theater industry, because during the summer we had truly a reckoning with how theater spaces operate, specifically within a viewpoint of race. And so I'm a people pleaser, so I'm very quick to always be it was great, but I'm trying to be more mindful of that now. But truly, to give credit where credit is very much due, Hamilton was so graceful about how we came back, and they worked with this wonderful woman named Karine, who works as a healer. Like, that's kind of her title, and she does a lot of yoga practice and stuff. And when we came back from the pandemic into rehearsal, there was a very intentional conversation and intentional practices about like, how are we going to come back into the space after what we've just endured? And that wasn't even just about the conversation we had in regards to the theater industry, but also it was about like the pandemic itself. Like, a lot of people lost, like, whether that was material things, whether that was people, whether that was spirit, like there was so much loss that was endured. And so there was really time given to us to experience grief and to experience the acknowledgement of trauma, and to like, how do we bring that back into the space, and how do we move forward to go forward, even though it may feel like we're going back? You know what I mean? It was this really incredible experience to kind of like allow to bring our pandemic selves into the space so that we could make the show again. And instead of like trying to redo the show, it really became, what's the new version of Hamilton that we're doing now? Like, what are the new things that we're bringing to it? And so it's been all of that to say, like, it's been incredibly different. But at the same time, my good friend who is in the show with me, who I was on tour with, in between, during the Saturday matinee show, looked at me backstage and went, I can't believe after you and I have been doing this all these years, the Saturday matinee is still as exhausting as it is right now in this moment. And we just laughed so hard because it's so true. Like, it's been years of me doing the show. The Saturday matinee is still one of the hardest shows. Like, it's still just utterly exhausting. And all of that to say, it's been really fascinating to kind of get back into that groove of my career, especially when it comes to like to Hamilton specifically, like getting back to the feelings of exhaustion and getting back to the feelings of soreness, and like, you know, how am I keeping the show fresh? Like, you know, what am I doing to preserve my mental health and my physical health and all of those different things? And so it's kind of a mixture of like, I'm creating new path, but at the same time, I'm like revisiting old habits and old things, you know, within the show. And so it's this really fascinating mix. And I think I've now gotten into a really nice groove with the show where like I am feeling kind of in the pocket of it, and I'm feeling really in rhythm in terms of like actually doing the show and going home and living my life outside of it and all that stuff. And so coming back has been kind of crazy, especially now because audition season is ramping up again. And it's like the first like real audition season I've had since 2019. And so it's been like kind of really crazy to like be on the phone with my representation and to be asking people, hey, can you read the scene for me? Because I have to film this self-tape. And, you know, so to kind of be back in the swing of things in that way has been both like trying and it's been really exciting. And I think a lot of actors can relate to this, that it's also been a little scary, like almost triggering in the sense of like, is it all going to go away in like 3 seconds if I trust this? But for the most part, it's been great. It's been really nice recently to kind of take these small steps forward back into what we used to feel like before, you know, the pandemic shut everything down.
I really appreciate all of that insight to coming back and what that's been for you and for your castmates and everybody, you know, putting the show on. I wonder too, and it's maybe different for someone who lives in New York where you're kind of always packed in and around people, but I would imagine like just being in a theater space with that many people in one room had to be horrifying. Like last September, it was my first time at an event with maybe 100 people.
Yeah.
And I was taking pictures, and for a minute I had to like just leave and take a breath outside because like I had not been around that many strangers in a very long time. I mean, I give you a lot of credit for being able to do that. I don't know that I would be able to just mentally process that.
I think a lot of people had that experience walking into rehearsal. I know for sure I had a lot of therapy sessions like leading up to it where I was just like, I don't really want to do this. And even when they were announcing the idea of these like healing sessions, I was like, I'm not doing that. I was like, I will not show up to I'm not looking to feel the things that I've worked very hard to suppress. Well, how dare you? How dare you make me process what I've gone through? And I was terrified. And I sometimes forget, and I have to force myself to actively acknowledge that those weeks of rehearsal leading up to opening, I was very closed off. I was very rigid, and I was not as, I would say, open and expanded as I usually am. I think I'm somebody that's like very interested in having a lot of conversations and very interested in exploring the psyche and emotional life. And I was so not interested in that during that time. I would be fair to say that I was a standoffish person, at least internally I was. It's funny you bring that up because one of our cast members, I remember, came forward and was like, I am standing right now speaking in front of you all right now like this because I'm scared to do it. I'm forcing myself to do it because I haven't done this in a long time. I don't know if I can perform anymore. I don't know if that's something that's within me. And he got really emotional. And the first time he ended up performing, we all just like wept with him because it was just like this moment of like being able to step into your own power again, especially because I think for a lot of us, we put so much to the side just so we could get through the day, you know, during the quarantine portion of the pandemic. And I remember the night that we opened, I did the same thing where I kind of forced myself to talk to everybody. And I was like, guys, I am so terrified to do this show tonight. I am so utterly terrified. I went to dinner with my girlfriend that night and she was looking at me. She was like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, I don't know if I can do this tonight. And it wasn't necessarily a matter of whether or not I have the ability to, but it was more like, am I ready to walk out to a 1,400 seat theater and perform after a year and a half of like forcing myself to tell myself, hey, right now you need to do everything you can to just like get through the day, and then to kind of put the switch on back like that to just be a performer. I mean, there was something really scary about that, really terrifying about that. And I think it's a really good point that you bring up that I think sometimes I personally don't acknowledge because it was really scary and sad to kind of walk through that space. And it took me a really long time to even like get to a place where like I was walking into work happy, because it's not that I wasn't grateful to be at work, but it was more that I was so scared it was all going to go away again that it was hard for me to communicate with people. It was hard for me to like try to form relationships in the building because I was like, I don't want to invest and then lose, you know, all of these different, you know, all these different things. And so for sure, my social anxiety was at an all-time high, you know, coming back into work. But I think that, and then, you know, in December, Hamilton had to shut down for 2 weeks because we had a crazy number of COVID cases. And I remember all of us kind of having panic attacks, kind of just being like, oh my God, it's happening again. We're not going to come back to work. And, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it really struck us in a way. And then when we came back to work that first week, I know for me, it was kind of like this, like, oh, we're going to come back. And then in another 4 weeks, it's going to shut down. And kind of being like, oh no, okay, you can trust this. It's okay. You can trust this. And so kind of these like little moments of like, it's okay. Like we're going to make it through. Like we're going to move to the next thing have been kind of freaky, but I think they've been really helpful in terms of how I deal with my own neuroses and how I deal with my own anxieties. And it's obviously unique. Like we've never experienced anything like this before. But it's been fascinating to say the least.
Absolutely. No, and to say that it's given you a new appreciation for just what all workers and all employees have to go through, of course, like is just the understatement of the century in terms of just what you see people working at grocery stores or working in hospitals. Like, of course, those are things that you kind of always think about as front lines. But as we're in this sort of new chapter of it all, you know, you never would have thought of the artists being the ones to be on a front line in this way, you know, or to be risking their health and their safety,
right?
Or just supposed to be the clowns, right?
Yeah,
making everybody laugh and clap and sing. But no, it's the fortitude that you all have had has just been really empowering and inspiring to watch.
Thank you. And it's been easy for me to be cynical and just be like, I'm playing pretend. Like, get over it, dude. Like, it's going to be okay. And then having to kind of consider. And then there's those moments when, like, I leave the theater. I don't really do stage door anymore and say how to get, because, like, we're not really supposed to. And I honestly also, the real reason is that, like, socially, right now in my life, I'm not in a place to do that. Like, it's just not good for me. It really, like, kind of messes with me. And every now and then I'll be leaving the theater and somebody will catch me and go, hey, I loved you in the show. Can I take a picture? And then I have to go, I can't unless, like, you want to, like, distance. Like, I'll stand over here and you stand all the way over there. And even in that moment, like, they're so happy, but I'm like, this is awful. I'm like, I just want to give them a hug. I want to give them a high five. I want to give them a fist bump. Like, I you know, all of these different things. And I kind of just, like, now realize in the moment, part of the reason I don't do the stage door is, like, a way of protecting myself. Cause I hate this, like, weird distance to, like, you know, I used to walk out, wave and leave. And I was like, that just felt like cheap. and maybe I'm overthinking it, but it is one of those things where like it becomes really easy to become, like I said earlier, like become cynical and just be like, you don't do anything, but then you consider those interactions.
And it sounds like you're reminded of what you're not able to do still too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what makes it easier to become cynical, because it's like, well, obviously I'm able to come out and be a clown for this money, but you know, that's all it matters. And it's not as that simple, you know, like as much as I was saying all of that when we shut down for those 2 weeks, you know, because of the COVID cases, like I was so scared and depressed. And so like, I just want to be back on stage. And, you know, I'm the main one. Everybody in the building will tell you I'm the main one that's like, I'm so tired. I need a break. Like, you know, but, you know, it really puts into perspective, like, you know, how much we being the theater industry and we being the population of the world have been working to get back, you know what I mean? To get back to a kind of a place, to the point where like, you know, New York just dropped the mask mandate and it does not look any different. I do not notice a change in the city. Like a lot of people are still wearing their mask on the subway. People are still wearing their mask everywhere they go. And I'm like, that's a testament to how much we have been fighting to make sure that we can actually get back to a place, you know, where we used to be.
What's a store from your childhood that you wish you could now shop at as an adult?
I love this question. A store? Like literally like a walk-in, like buy things at a store?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm probably going to get emotional. I actually have quite a number. Malls were really big for me as a kid. Like malls were very important to me. So I grew up in Miami, Florida, and there was, okay, let's see if I can remember this. So I was living in West Miami, which was kind of like between, Miami is kind of like labeled as like North and South. It's not really labeled like East and West. So I was living like kind of in between North and South, closer to South Miami for the first few years of my life. And I would say some of my fondest childhood memories are from that era. And so there was like a small like strip mall very near the apartment we were living in called Mall of America. Not the Mall of America, just called Mall of America.
Oh, I was gonna say, oh yeah, Mall of America. I've heard of
No,
that.
but it was like a very like off-brand like Mall of America. Like it was not related to the Mall of America in any way. Like truly a strip mall. And it was this very small, tiny little strip mall, and there was a specific, oh my God, we're really going to get into it. So the deepest memories I have from there was that there used to be a KB Toys in there, which like not before Toys R Us, but when Toys R Us was like the number one toy shop, there were all these other different stores, you know, that you could get that just like weren't as thorough or good. And KB Toys was one of those shops, and they were mostly in malls.
It was like the Kmart of toy stores.
Yeah, literally it was the Kmart of toy stores, and you could really only find them in malls.
Yeah.
So KB Toys was huge for me. And also I remember that across the way from that KB Toys within the mall, there was like a little playpen. But the funny thing about this playpen was that there was nothing in it. It was just a pit. It was just a carpeted pit. But that pit, like anytime I saw that pit, I was like, yep, I'm in. And I don't know what I was doing in the pit, because there was when I tell you there was nothing in there, like there weren't chairs, there was nothing in that pit. But I was in that carpeted pit.
That's so Mall of America.
I know. And so there was that. And then the next thing that I really have a distinct memory of was a Marshalls. And the reason I have such a distinct memory of the Marshalls was because back in the day, I don't know if people remember this, but Ross and Marshalls used to have videotape sections. They have like smaller DVD sections, but they used to have like really big videotape sections. And specifically, they were never like, you know, movies or anything. It was usually things you wouldn't find like in a Walmart or in like a big store. So like I got every single one of my Sesame Street tapes, Marshalls and Ross. So like I specifically would love going into Mall of America because I knew that if I went into the Ross and Marshall, I most likely was going to get one of those tapes. And I'm pretty sure those tapes were cheap as heck, because every time I left, there was always a tape in my hand. I have a distinct memory of getting the Count It Higher music video tape.
Learning about
that
numbers.
was like the special to learn about numbers. Exactly. I remember getting that from there. I remember getting Elmo's Guessing Game from there. They also used to have, when Jim Henson Videos was like thriving in the 90s, and they had like It's Time to Meet the Muppets and More Muppets Please and Tale of Bunny Picnic and Muppet Babies and Fraggle Rock, like when all those tapes were going around.
Muppet Classic Theater.
Like I definitely got it from a Ross or a Marshall's. And then the third store that I would go to that I've actually spent a lot of time trying to see if I could find it again, and I can't find any history of it, is I believe it was called 99 Cent and Stuff. I don't think it was called the 99-cent store. I think it was called 99 Cent and Stuff. The 99 was blue, and then and stuff was like in little red lettering, like right next to it. And the reason I have a distinct memory of it is because that had probably the biggest videotape collection I'd ever seen. And any Muppet tape I had came from there. So like Great Muppet Caper, Muppet Treasure Island was from a flea market. But there's like all kinds of stuff. I remember looking at their section and being like, I've never been in a store where specifically the tape of Muppets is this expansive. And I would honestly just like go and look at it because I was so like blown away. When I was a kid, I always felt like it was a niche thing to be into. So I had a really hard time finding those tapes in stores. But in 99 Cent and Stuff, it was just like as far as the eye can see of just Muppet tapes. And it blew my mind. And I can't find it anywhere. When I go back home, I always try to go see if I can find any remnants of it, but I think it got bought out or something, or their logo brand changed or something like that, because I can't find it. But those three are very deeply connected, like core memories in my mind.
I love that. And I wonder, our experiences are very similar in that growing up, being a Muppet fan, not knowing that there are necessarily even other people out there who like and have this attraction to it. But I wonder, you specifically describing these stores and these experiences of going into a place and kind of finding it. Did you ever notice yourself developing, I think there was a Tough Pigs article about this, the sixth Muppet sense, where you kind of just go into a store
and you could tell there was going to be a Muppet thing in there.
There's going to be a Muppet thing in here.
Yes, I absolutely
You go to a
did.
flea market and you're like, I bet there's a stack of records somewhere.
Yes.
With, the Sesame Street book and record.
100%. I have that feeling in Goodwills. If I walk into a Goodwill, I can tell the way the Goodwill is like shifted if I will find a Muppet related thing. Or depending on the city. Like I remember I was in Pittsburgh with my girlfriend and she would love going to Goodwill to get like furniture for grad school. And I walked into one and I was like, oh, maybe. And then I just literally looked around and went, no, not in here. And I was completely correct. I was like, there was not one thing in there for Muppets. But yeah, I never even thought about that. But I definitely had like a sixth Muppet sense. But at the same time, I don't know if it's totally true, because I had a really cool experience growing up that I was always in not like corporate shops. I was usually in like weird thrift shops or flea markets or, offshoot brand, kind of stores and stuff like that. And so I think if I'm in a place where like I know it's not like a major, like if it's not a Walmart, it's not a Best Buy or anything like that, if I'm in one of those stores, I can probably get a sense of like, I bet you I'll find something in here Muppet related. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
What's a food item you remember having disliked for the longest?
Disliked? Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. That's not where I thought that was going.
Like you're just like, I've had a beef with this thing since I was 2 years old.
Beets. Dude, I can't with beets. Beets are always, I don't get them. They stain your mouth. Their texture is horrific. I hate beets. But if I'm really beets I feel like is like an easy one to go to. Let me really think about this. Oh, do you know what I have beef with and people are really gonna get mad at me? Twizzlers. I have such beef with Twizzlers because I think for so long they looked so good, and I'll never forget the first time I had it and how disappointed I was. Just like how utterly disappointed the taste of licorice was, and I was like, this is awful. Nothing about this.
What are you people doing?
Yeah, I was like, what are you all talking about? This is terrible. I hate licorice. I hate Twizzlers so much. I'm sure I have beef with lots of food, but I'm going to give it to licorice. Licorice really, like, was definitely a moment in time where I was like, I am unbelievably disappointed in how much I hate you.
I have that same thing with fish fries. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah. That's something where like I love going into a place that's making them, love the smell of them.
And then as soon as you try them
many times, and it's just like, oh, what are you guys doing?
Like fish sticks, like that's just not for you.
Yeah, just not for me.
Oh, that's so crazy. I was addicted to fish sticks as a kid. I love me some fish sticks. I definitely had that experience where I walk in somewhere and it like smells like, oh, this is gonna be it, and then as soon as I eat it, I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
Nope. I know I've had that experience. Do you know what I had it with for a few years, but I've gotten around to it? Sushi. That was my thing with sushi for a long time. I really was like, I love the idea of sushi. I love the way people look when they eat sushi. When I walk in, it smells like fresh fish and it smells like amazing. And then the first couple of times I had sushi, I was like, I don't know what y'all think this is, but this is not what y'all portray. This is disgusting. But now I love sushi. I really do love sushi now.
He's like, am I being punked? Like,
I was like, y'all joking. Y'all kidding me.
Right now?
Yeah, exactly. Like, where the camera's at. This is not it. Y'all playing me.
Is there a TV show you remember not particularly liking growing up, but just having on in the background as like noise while you were doing other things?
Oh, that's a great question. MASH.
Oh.
MASH was a really like, I don't know why it was, and I wouldn't even say people would like watch it in my house. Do you know what I think of when I think of that show? Like when I was a kid and you had to like go to TV Guide, the channel, to like find what was on TV, MASH was always on. And I think if I was ever like, I just want to have the TV on while I play with my toys, I would usually put it on TV Land, and usually MASH was playing. Another show that was just always on in the background, that's really good. These are great questions, Cam. MASH. The 700 Club.
Oh
no. This is a very interesting question because TV was so important to me as a kid that like,
yeah,
it was probably not even so. It was the most important thing to me in my life when I was growing up, because I didn't go out, I didn't like hang out with friends or anything like that. Like that wasn't something I was. Sorry, Mom. I wasn't allowed to do this. That's just the truth. And so TV was really all I had.
And you would just schedule your day around it.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, oh, okay, Price is Right is wrapping up now.
Precisely.
Better start making lunch.
Correct. Like that was literally how my life worked. And so because of that, I rarely had things just on in the background. Oh, you know what though? I was really addicted to Nickelodeon as a kid, so if certain shows came on, I wouldn't change it, but I wouldn't pay attention. Shows would include, oh, this is going to get sacrilege. I'm going to get some hate. Shows like that included like Danny Phantom. I don't know why. Okay. Danny Phantom just didn't strike a chord with me, so I would always let that just play in the background.
It wasn't the Fairly Odd Parents.
It was not the Fairly Odd Parents, Butch Hartman.
You better be careful. He's busy watching the 700 Club. So.
He's busy watching. Yeah, exactly. but definitely like Danny Phantom and like Ben 10. I watched As Told by Ginger sometimes, but that was sometimes a show that was like in the background. It was a lot of kids show cartoons that I would like let play in the background sometimes. Oh, there was a show called Naturally Sadie, I think, on Disney Channel.
Oh, I vaguely remember that.
It was the most like boring cookie cutter. Like, I mean, there was nothing about the show to me that was unique. Like, there was nothing. Yeah. It was like Dear Diary today, and it was just like a boring ass day in Midwest high school. Like, there was nothing about it that I thought was unique. But I would let that play in the background because it had like nice background music. So that's really interesting because I regarded like TBS, TV Land, Adult Swim, and like some ABC Family shows that were doing reruns as shows that like were high regard for me, and so I would really pay attention to that. Oh, you know what was another show I let play in the background all the time? Seventh Heaven, and Step by Step, because they were always playing on ABC Family.
They were
growing
always
up.
playing on ABC Family.
So those were always definitely like kind of playing in the background. And for a long time, Gilmore Girls. But then I really got into Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
In college, I really got into Gilmore Girls. So then I kind of let that pass. But when I was a kid, Gilmore Girls was definitely one of those shows of like, ugh, again. and it's an hour long. Why? Like, I was always
right. Well, and sometimes too, it would be like, oh, I know that a show that I do like is going to come on after this,
so I'll just let it play. Yeah, that's so true.
And then, like, through osmosis, all of a sudden you're like, why am I so invested in Rory
dating Jess? Jess seems like such a dick. Just because he reads Jack Kerouac, she's gonna keep talking to him.
Is it the smolder? It might be.
Oh my god! Am I into Jess? What's happening? Oh, that's so true. I never considered that thing of, like, you know, there was no such thing as on demand or like streaming. So like you waited for your show. Like that was a thing on TBS because like I loved Everybody Loves Raymond. I love King of Queens and I love Seinfeld, but I hated Just Shoot Me. Like Just Shoot Me just didn't do anything for me. And Just Shoot Me would be like smack dab in the middle of it. So I would just like let Just Shoot Me play until Seinfeld or According to Jim would come on. And so, yeah, that kind of stuff always happened all the time.
All right. This one might break your brain a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm excited to hear what you're going to say. What's a song you wish that you could forget completely so that you can hear it
for the first time
again for the very first time?
I think about this all the time. The entirety of Panic at the Disco's first album. Oh my god, what is it called?
I have no idea.
Whichever one that I chime in with the haven't you people ever heard of closing the goddamn door. That whole album. The first time I heard that album was like a few years ago because I wasn't a huge Panic at the Disco fan growing up, but I just like randomly put it on when I was driving. It was actually when I was on tour. I was driving from one city to another and I just put it on. And the experience I had listening to it, I was just like, oh my God, this is like every angsty thing I've ever wanted to feel as a teenager that like Fall Out Boy wasn't just quite enough and that My Chemical Romance was too much of. I was like, this is like exactly what I want. So the first time I heard that, I definitely was like, whoa, this is really interesting. So today I was watching, shocker, I was watching The Muppet Show and I was watching Anne Murray's episode, and her episode starts with the iconic, like, I get around with the motorcycle pigs. And I was like listening to it and like bobbing my head. And I was like, I just love this rendition of it. And I was like, I can't believe I'm not over this. Like, I can't believe that like this has not like gotten annoying to me. Like this still is like such a good cover. And there's a lot of stuff from the Muppets that I'm like, I wish I could hear that for the first time. And one of those is Old Fashioned Love Song that Paul Williams does in the first season. You asked for one song and I gave you like 50 just now.
You're fine. That's great.
But there's so much music that I like want to, you know what I would say? Honest to God truth, the entirety of Elmapalooza. Because those covers are so good.
Yeah.
Specifically just Happy to Be Me with the Fugees and Big Bird and Snuffy is like one of the greatest like covers of a Sesame Street song ever done. That's like one that like would be in the like hip hop rotation that my dad would have. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was just so good that like it would just be in you know, regular music in my house.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a big one for me because Elmapalooza music was so important to me growing up that I would love to rehear all of that for the first time.
I like that. I was so pissed on the, oh God, we're getting real.
Let's go. Let's
this.
go.
I was so pissed that the soundtrack to Elmapalooza didn't have the version of songs with that like,
the medley.
The medley
like,
with everybody.
What is happening?
The whole reason they're singing songs is because it was a song with songs in it.
I'm like, wasn't this a part of the 30th anniversary celebration? Like, why aren't you playing all of the iconic music? Like, what's wrong with y'all? Oh my God. What made me mad was that there was this like Steven Tyler, I Love Trash. And I was like, you didn't film this? I was like, this wasn't in the freaking, or the Celine Dion. What was the Celine Dion one that they also did not record on camera? I forget what it was
Happy
called.
to Meet You?
Yes. Happy to meet you. Happy to meet you. Oh my God. That I just got chills. Like that one is so good. That one is frustrating. That special also doesn't get enough love. Like I think that is a genuinely very solid special. That to me encapsulates why Joey Mazzarino was so important for the writing of Sesame Street, because that is like such a Oh, man, we really are getting into it. That's like such a defining factor of like Sesame Street 90s comedy, of like how they were able to like really incorporate the old stuff that they founded on and like where it was moving in a new direction. I just had this conversation with a friend who are not puppet people, and they kept, because they know I love Muppets and puppets and stuff, and they're like, oh my god, the Elmo Rocco stuff is so funny and blah blah blah. Like everyone keeps talking to me about balsamic vinegar, and like everyone keeps like laughing about it all. And I like went on a tangent when I was like, guys, that's because Ryan Dillon and Kevin Clash are both brilliant improvers. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Mm-hmm. They're like, wait, that's not scripted? I'm like, no. That's why it's so funny.
No. And this is like why we've been, you know, obsessed with this stuff for forever, is because like we stuck along long enough to appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Do you watch the new Jon Stewart show? The Problem with Jon Stewart on Apple?
No, I didn't know it was out. I gotta see it.
The first joke on the show is an Elmo Palooza joke.
Oh, that's excellent. Now I have to watch it. I have to go back and see it. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, that's also the funny thing. I've explained this to my mom a million times, because like my mom thinks I'm hilarious because my music tastes are pretty old school, like 70s and 80s old school. She's always like, why do you know all of this music? Like, why do you know all these artists? And it's always because they first appeared on Sesame Street or the Muppets. And then from there, I get obsessed with their music. And Jon Stewart, David Alan Grier, like everyone in all of these specials, and even in Elmo Palooza specifically, like I only know about them in reference to Elmo Palooza. Same thing with En Vogue, same thing with Celine Dion, same thing with Jimmy Buffett, same thing with Kenny Loggins. Like, I don't know Kenny Loggins from Footloose. I know Kenny Loggins from One Small Voice in Elmo Palooza. So it's always so funny whenever people like reference certain things. Like I remember I met Ben Vereen once when I was like, I think 15, and we were doing a Q&A. And I raised my hand and was like, what was it like being on the Muppet Show? And he looked at me like I was crazy. He was like, he was like, have you seen that? And I'm like, yeah, the first season came out on DVD 2 years ago and I have it. And he was like, okay. I loved it. He just looked at me like, why do you know that? That was from the 70s. But that's such a testament, like that reference that Jon Stewart makes, you know, to kind of the niche quality about a lot of Muppet fans, is that like I think a lot of Muppet fans' relationship to certain celebrities is whether or not they've interacted with the Muppets. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a fascinating like subculture within the culture of like being a Muppet fan.
So now getting into the interview meat as a whole, where we kind of talk about not just like random things, but
not just our nerd passions.
Yes, it's a little more specific.
Real things people will actually want to hear.
Yeah. Not just for you, me, and our grandkids. Can you describe what it felt like for you the first time that you ever truly got lost in a role? Like that moment where like you stop making memories, and maybe the question is more like describe the moments right after you came back into your body.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if I remember the first time, but one of the first shows that I experienced that was actually when I did Oklahoma, my junior year of college, and I played Judd, and I was like on a mission to reevaluate and reframe what we thought of Judd. So for those who might not know Oklahoma, it's the story about this town in Oklahoma, turn of the century. There's a character named Judd who's kind of the, like, I guess he would be the outcast of the town, kind of dirty. He lives in a shed, and he works for Aunt Eller, who's one of the main characters, and he wants to ask out Lori, who's the female lead, but the male lead, Curly, wants to ask out Lori, and because Curly has terrible communication and emotional maturity, he can't just straight up ask Lori. He has to kind of like swoon and charm her. And his competition is Judd. But Judd is this very, in my opinion, socially anxious, in a way, socially inept very anxious person who has a really hard time making genuine social connection, who's also like not a perfect person, definitely committed some crimes in the past, like setting fire to like the last, farm that he worked at. And, it's a kind of a complicated thing. But what I really wanted to emphasize was his ineptness to be able to have conversation and his ineptness to be able to have social interaction. And I think that there's a scene where he has with Laurie where basically like it's clear that Laurie is not present with him and he kind of loses it. He kind of screams at her and then runs away. And this in the scene, I don't know what it was, but in the scene, I hate using this term, but it's true. I blacked out where like I don't remember like what was happening. And then when I ran off stage, I had to kind of like take a second. And so I started, because it was such an intense scene, I started doing this thing where the moment that I run off stage, I break into a really silly and stupid dance because it was like the best way for me to kind of get out of the brain of the character and like get into my own body again. And nobody backstage understood what I was doing. But for me, it was like, this is a healthy way to move out of the psyche of someone who does not exist. But it was one of those moments where like I would leave and I would always check in with the girl who's playing Laurie and I'd be like, are you okay? Like, everything cool? And she was like, yeah, it's great. She's like, you're just really in it. I'm like, yes, I know. I'm like, it's really crazy. But that was kind of one of the first roles where I really kind of found myself like I'm really allowing myself to get into the psyche of this character and just live in his shoes and just like be him on stage. And it was kind of scary that it was that character, but it was also really exciting that like it was this character who I believe is so complex and there are so many different elements to him that can be portrayed on stage. And so that was probably the first role that I really understood that notion of like getting lost in a character.
Yeah. But I wonder in Hamilton as Mulligan and Madison, from the outside, maybe it could be difficult for people to necessarily see like what their major story arcs are, especially when they're, in the background compared to Hamilton or Burr or Eliza. But what do you see in their journey that resonates with you enough to want to get lost in their story every night? Because they were always the character. That was always the track you were going for, right?
Yeah, that was the only track I was considered for.
That's what I thought.
So, but it was always the track that I wanted to do too, and I think part of it was because I just liked the energy that they brought to the stage. Mm-hmm. But the things that I see like within Hamilton. So, what's interesting about that question is that that's kind of how I was able to help define the biggest differentiation between the two characters. I think a lot of people are always like, how do you play two different characters? And for me, specifically with Mulligan Madison, like that's kind of the easiest transition between the two, I think, out of the like Lafayette Jefferson and the Lawrence Philippe and the Peggy Mariah. Like I think Mulligan Madison has the biggest advantage because they're such distinct different personalities. But the thing that really helped me solidify those differences were what are their approaches in terms of how they relate to Hamilton throughout the whole show. Specifically, Mulligan is there to make sure Hamilton succeeds. And then Madison is specifically set up so that Hamilton fails. And so what are the things that I am doing to actively move in those directions? And I think that in the first act, how Hamilton's energy really pulses really changes the way that I approach Hamilton, because there are ways to do Hamilton that are like kind of chill, but his brain is still like moving as fast as possible, but maybe physically it's not represented in that same way. And then there are times when I can see both the brain and the physicality moving at that kind of quick speed. And that really just kind of influences the way that I go about it. And I kind of like that relationship that basically the Hamilton will tell me what he needs from the Mulligan. Mm. And then in the same thing with Madison, for Burr's relationship to Madison and Jefferson is strictly political in the sense that like he's trying to get what he wants out of them. And so depending on how obvious he makes that is how my relationship to Burr shifts day to day.
And I love the idea of you needing to adapt depending on how Hamilton is portrayed each night. What is your relation to Burr then? Because technically you're a character in the story that he's telling every night. So
the way that I view Hamilton is that Burr's punishment for killing Hamilton, like his punishment, his hell, is that he is required to retell the story of Hamilton every single day. In that context, it's just torture to like have, and what he doesn't realize is that he is continually telling it. Like, he's not aware that his punishment is to retell the story. Like, as soon as it's over, like, what I imagine is like, who tells your story? Blackout. Dun 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 dun. How does a bat? And it just does not stop. His entire existence post-mortem on this earth is continually doing Hamilton. And what that contextualizes for me is that he has to go through that entire journey. I'm getting chills again. It's like freaking me out, because the idea that somebody has to kind of go through an entire life again is really, I think, is really terrifying. And what makes me excited and what makes me kind of be like, oh, he's really like getting lost out there, is the moments where his introspection gets him close to realizing his faults, but doesn't complete. So Wait For It is one of those moments where, like, in Wait For It, he's like, Hamilton does this and Hamilton does that, but I don't do that. Why is it not that? I guess I just have to wait for it. You know what I mean? Instead of him being like, maybe I should be a little bit more upfront. Maybe I should be a little bit more direct about my wants and my needs, and I should be a little bit more specific. He goes, no, I'm just going to sit in the sidelines again. So watching him get so close to like what the answer is and then like step back, for me, is so fascinating, because it's that kind of thing where it's like, you know, when you're watching your favorite movie and there's like a terrible part that's about to come up, and like there's a part of you that's like, maybe it'll change. Maybe it won't be this terrible thing that I'm about to see, but it absolutely will be. I think that's such an exciting thing to see in a Burr every single night, and everyone plays Burr so differently. So like every time that like it's, you know, he's about to shoot him again, I'm like, maybe he won't, he shoots him. You know, and I think there's something so exciting about the repetition of a mistake and watching that happen every single time. And I think a part of it is that, like, I would love to be able to step in those shoes and, like, live through that. But it's also just, like, fascinating to get to watch that on stage. And my only job is to provide comic relief every now and then, or to, like, provide a sort of support system for Hamilton, or provide an antagonizing goal for Hamilton. In both of those senses, it's like really exciting to kind of just be that, and then get to watch somebody, specifically Burr, have to live that torture. I think it's just a fascinating psychological study.
This is maybe really naive on my part. I had never thought of, I knew Burr as the narrator, but I never considered him being an unreliable narrator in any kind of way.
Yeah.
That it's all from his perspective, which again, it's like me not being thinking critically about the show that I've seen a couple times now. But yeah, that's what a great way of kind of describing the way you need to shift your performance and the way that you are doing things in relation to whoever your Burr is that night or whoever your Hamilton is that night. That's a really thank you for sharing that, because I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. And to give you credit, like I think that's more a reflection of how good the writing is, because and that's not me blowing up smoke my boss's ass. That's like truly I think with Lin, like what Lin has done that's really genius with Burr is that Burr, he has written a perspective on the show that makes it hard to distinguish whether or not Burr over-exaggerated how crazy Hamilton was, or whether or not Hamilton was actually that crazy. Because Burr never tells a lie, but based on the perspective is when you kind of go, oh, why do you feel that way? Like the line that always gets to me where I go, God damn it, Burr, like if you would just get out of your own way, you would see how crazy you sound. And it's when he says, they don't teach you this in your classes. Look it up. Hamilton was wearing his glasses. Why? If not to take deadly aim. It's him or me. The world will never be the same. Like, he immediately takes the narrative of Hamilton using his glasses as a direct attack on him to kill him. And that perspective to me kind of keys into the unreliable narrator aspect of it all. But the brilliant thing about Hamilton is that the narrator perspective shifts depending on the number, depending on the moment. Like, because there are so many moments where Burr is not in the room. So like One Last Time is completely a omnipresent view of when Washington decided it was time for him to move on. That was not given to us by Burr. But then the Adams administration, which is when we go into we know about the check stubs by James Reynolds, completely from Burr's point of view. And so all of those different ways of peering into the scenes, depending, really make it interesting for the audience. And I think it's why it's such an emotional journey, because you're constantly going through all of these different POVs. But then you have these moments like, wait for it, where it's like, oh my God, like I understand like what you're going through, but you're the one getting in your own way. You're the one crafting this narrative for yourself. And that's why the line, the world was wide enough for both Hamilton and me, is so soul crushing, because he doesn't realize it until after he's eradicated him from the earth that, oh, I'm the reason that I never got what I wanted. It was never about Hamilton. It was always about me. That's like the craziness of the entire show, is that like Burr realizing he's the one that got in his own way, not Hamilton. And it's what makes the show brilliant, because you watch the whole show being like, God damn, Hamilton, chill. Like, it's okay. And like you watch Hamilton ruin his own life in multiple ways, and it's still not about that. Like, it's still not about the fact that Hamilton was too much. It's about the fact that Burr couldn't handle being himself within Hamilton's presence. So, I mean, that's another thing. Like, I could go on for hours about anything Hamilton related, because it's just so dense and it's so brilliantly nuanced in the way that it is presented. You know, even with something like Mulligan Madison, which, you know, at the surface, I completely agree with you, is very much just comic relief, very much a supportive character. But what's brilliant about the creative team is that they challenge me to think way outside the box, and they challenge me to like not take it at face value. You know, even in certain scenes where they're like, Fergie, like you're being funny, but why are you like, what's the purpose? Like, how are you helping the scene? Like, what's moving forward in this sense? And those certain challenges, I think, is what really makes the show tick, because nobody is unimportant, no matter who you are in the scene. Even if it's Hurricane and it's Hamilton solo, there's a million things happening during that scene, and each facet of that scene is incredibly important to tell Hamilton's story. And so, like, how are we actually contributing to that to like move it forward? And that's like the number one thing I'll appreciate about the show always.
Told me and Adam when you were on the other show how seeing Hamilton for the first time the night before it opened felt like a game changer for you, just in terms of,
yeah,
you know, I actually I think that's really kind of all you said, and because then you went on to talk about some other things. But what did that evening mean to you, and kind of recontextualize for theater for you? Because it seemed like it was almost like a system reboot, hard reset. Like,
oh yeah,
we're gonna, you know, we just put a man on the moon kind of feeling.
100%. You know, I think what's my relationship to theater is so jolted, and I didn't realize until the pandemic that part of it is because so much of why I came into theater is because I'm interested in acting, but it's also because it came to me second. First was puppetry. And then when I kind of was like, oh, this maybe is a little too hard, or this isn't something that I realistically see as being a career choice, I went into something more doable like theater. Yeah. But going into theater, and part of it was because, you know, as a black man, you watch theater and it's like, oh, there's a very clear path for me. I can play all of these dudes from the turn of the century. I can play the slaves. I can play the servants. I can play, you know, or I can do the very, you know, nuanced things like The Wiz, and I can do Color Purple, and I can do, you know, all of these very specific things.
Like, yeah.
Book of Mormon. Yeah, there are these very specific tracks that you see yourself that it's like, this is what black people serve in the theater. And it wasn't until college that I found myself questioning, like, do I like that so far this is how black people service theater? It's interesting that I find myself resisting wanting to do music from Color Purple or from The Wiz or from these shows that are typically labeled as black shows. And I was like, I wonder what it is about that that makes me do that. And part of it's because like I don't think they reflect the experience that I personally have had as a black man in this country growing up. And so I was very ready to do all those shows and I was very prepared, but I don't necessarily think I ever found a lot of shows that really reflected that I found myself going, yes, I am meant to, as a black person, do this, until I saw Hamilton. And part of that was the daringness of it, of like, yeah, they're founding fathers and they're all people of color and they're rapping. Like there's such a stark FU in that sense that really attracted me, you know?
Right.
And when I first saw it, it was so just like, wow, this is so not, these aren't the rules. Like these are not the rules. And there was something so, as somebody who is a rule follower, that was very attractive to me. And I think that I had been obsessed with it. A friend of mine, Daniel Watts, who had done the show in the workshops and stuff, was telling me about it. And when he told me the concept, I laughed at him. I was like, this is stupid. You should get out of that as quickly as you can. And he was like, you don't really understand, dude. Like this will change the world. Like it's crazy. It's really one of the craziest things I've ever been a part of. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I noticed that there was when it went to the public off Broadway, which we just celebrated the 7-year anniversary of the other day, which is insane to think about. I think it was February 16th or 17th or something like that.
And we're also, if you really want to feel old, we're approaching 13 years since Lynn premiered it at the White House.
Oh my
It's 13 years this May that he premiered it during the first Obama administration.
Is it really?
Yeah, because it was 2009.
So that's hilarious because I noticed on YouTube, because so my friend Watts told me about that in the fall. That spring I did In the Heights, or that winter I did In the Heights.
Okay.
And as I was doing In the Heights, that was also one of the first shows where I was like, I really understand this idea of using hip hop as a theater device. That is something that really makes sense to me. And I was like, I can't play Usnavi, but I really think I can dig into that. Like that is something I know I can really bring to the stage. And so I was like, I wonder if Lynn's written anything else, forgetting that he was writing this Hamilton thing. And when I went to his website, there was a link to the tickets at Public. And I was like, oh, they're already sold out. I was like, they haven't even opened yet. What do you mean it's already sold out? And then in addition to that, there was like a little video clip from their like preview process. And it was 1 minute of just my shot. And I watched it. I kid you not. I watched it 1,000 times probably within 2 months because I just was so in shock of what I was watching on stage. And I was like, this just doesn't make sense. Like, what do you mean they're founding fathers and they're rapping and Chris Jackson is playing George Washington? Like, everything about it just didn't make sense to me. And as I kind of kept following it, I realized very quickly, like, I need to go see this because pretty soon there is no way it's going to be possible to see this. So I, went and did a summer stock gig and realized I was going to be in New York with family. And I told my mom, I was like, would you care if I like did not spend one day with you so that I could go see a Broadway show? And she said, sure. And all the money that I had saved that summer, I threw it away on one ticket. And I saw it the night before it opened on Broadway, not even realizing that was the night that I saw it. And as I was watching it, it was not even just like a kind of game changer in terms of like how I feel about theater. I think it was a game changer about like how I felt about myself as a black person. Like, I think it really just shifted the way that I was like, there is such a new, and that's like such a big conversation happening within black communities right now, like the nuance of like what it is to be black in America, especially in the context of media. But like for me, as somebody who grew up on the Muppets and Sesame Street and like, John Denver and Elton John being my two favorite artists, I wasn't necessarily popular amongst the kids who thought 50 Cent was a god, and so for me, to be able to be in this theater and to see this like Shakespeare-like text being spoken at the pace of an Eminem song, it truly blew my mind because I was like, everything about my experience as a human being, I'm seeing reflected. And also, I think I can do that. And also, I think I have no place doing that. Also, this is everything I've ever wanted. Also, I'm like kind of turned on. Also, like, like all of these different feelings are happening to me right now. And I'm just so overstimulated by the way the material is being presented to me, because it's just truly something I've never experienced before. And I think it's hard because when I finished watching the show and I went back to college, like, people thought I was crazy because I could not stop talking about it. People truly was like, Fergie, shut up. Like, we get it. Like, Hamilton's good. And I'm like, no, guys, it's changed the fabric of my DNA. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to like just talk to talk. Like, it really did change everything about me. Like, life before Hamilton is hard for me to comprehend, because once I was introduced to it, it didn't just become my personality. It became the reason I did theater. And I was like, I don't understand why I did theater before this. And it's something that, like, as I've said, like, way earlier in the beginning of the podcast, like, it's so easy for me to be like, I'm tired. I want to go home. I want to drink. I don't want to be here. It's something that I refer back to whenever I have those days, because I know exactly where I was sitting. I know exactly the day it was. I know exactly what time it was. I have very core, distinct memories from that night of watching David jump off the table, of watching the entrance of Oak, of watching Wait For It and Room Where It Happens. Like, I remember all of these moments very directly, because it shifted something in me just about, like, what it is, what my relationship to musical theater in general is. Because from simply just having Black and brown people doing this material, portraying intelligent people with power and money and agency, using a device that societally we have put down because of all kinds of different reasons, you know, the cursing, the sexuality, the drug talk, the car talk, like, to have those two things in one space and to exist in all of its both, like, problematicness and in its glory is the definition of nuance. And that's why I love Hamilton, because even as we're having conversations about Hamilton coming back from what we experienced this summer, like, there are a lot of conversations about whether or not Hamilton is still relevant, about whether or not Hamilton is still worth discussing, because technically these people were slave owners, and are we just glorifying slave owners? Are we glorifying, you know, what their place in history was? And again, the nuance of, like, the problematicness of, like, the fact that we kind of are not celebrating, but we're putting a platform to these slave owners, but at the same time, we're presenting them in all of their humanness, is what I live for. Like, that's what's exciting to me about that show, is that it's not simply just the fact that it's rapping founding fathers. It's like, we're using rap to expose the entire facet of their humanness. And that's the thing that blows me up.
Like, who are the actors being given the platform to do that?
Yeah.
On a Broadway stage, in a place where normally they would only have the track in, you know, The Wiz or The Color Purple or any of those other things.
Yeah.
You'll appreciate this story. I hope I haven't told you this, but at the O'Neill, the first year that they had opened the new, it's like the dance hall and the digital, like, keyboard and editing space with all the computers and such, which is the Jim and Jane Henson whatever rehearsal hall. And so you go in it, and there's all these great pictures of Jim with Kermit and of some puppetry performances that had happened there. And you kind of round the corner to the digital media lab, and there was a picture of Meryl Streep when she was there as like a teenager or 20-something. And as I'm seeing this for the first time in the summer of 2015, there's also a picture of this little scrawny guy, black and white photo, and he's holding a keyboard. And a bunch of us puppeteers were like, oh, who's that guy? Why is he not, like, why is he there? Because we realized they wouldn't have just hung up a photo for no reason, but we were all kind of just like, really, who? And maybe he must be a music guy or whatever. And cut to the next summer, we see that picture again, and everybody knows, oh, that's Lynn. Yeah, and that's he did In the Heights here, and he's now one of the big, and even at that time he was already one of the biggest people in musical theater, but to have that kind of recontextualizing of him was pretty wild.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned before that auditioning is the job and being in the show is the vacation. Yeah. So what you've mentioned, you're kind of in audition season, and maybe looking for the next opportunity. How do you know when it's time to get back to work, so to speak? Like when do you say like, okay, this has been great. I love being on Hamilton, but I need to start looking for these other opportunities to grow?
That's a great question. I think in lieu to what I was saying about the idea that auditioning is the job, is that like there's never, you're always like, depending on the audition, like you're gonna do it, even if you don't necessarily consider taking it. Like I remember when I did my first contract with Hamilton, the way contracts work is that you get outs, and the out is essentially like if you get offered a television show, depending on how your out is. So like if I've done 6 months of a contract, I have an out to do television, which basically means that like I am granted leave of absence to go do this television show. And so in my first year at Hamilton, I'd kind of told my agents like, I know I have outs, but like I'm in Hamilton, I don't care, like blah, 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 blah. And, they were kind of like, okay. And they sent me auditions anyway. And I found myself getting auditions for things that I was like, oh, well, this is a TV show I really like. Like if I got auditioned for this, like I'd love to audition for them. And so much of what's happened over the years now is that like, even with Ham, like Ham has become a really magnificent thing for me in the sense of like, I don't view it as like one day I'm going to leave. Ham is right now in my life the thing of like that I'm doing right now. And if something else were to come along, I've been in it long enough that I can make peace with leaving it. Yeah. But it's not something I'm actively looking to leave. And because of that, it makes the audition process a little bit more fun and a little bit more easy. And that's a very privileged thing to say, by the way, because not every show is in that position. Right. But so much of like what comes into my mind if I receive an audition, whether or not I want to do that audition, are the project, the people, the timing. And for me, it's also like, who are the people auditioning me? So like there are a couple TV shows that I was like, I'm not a fan of this TV show. Like I'm not a fan of like what it does, but I'm a fan of the people who cast it because they cast these other shows that I really like. Yeah. And I would like for them to see my work. So sure, I'll submit for this, even if I don't think I'm good for this show, or even if I don't think that, and it's very rare that I'm often like, well, I may not like this show, but sure, I'll go in for it. It's usually not about that. It's more about like, what is this audition going to do in terms of elevation or in terms of momentum? So I find myself auditioning for things that I'm like, in a very crazy ideal world that like everything that comes my way I get offered, I would deny this. But there is not a lot of opportunity to be denied because 9 times out of 10, you might not even get a call back. What it really comes down to is me being like, oh, I want these people to see me because I really enjoy the work that they do. But when it specifically comes to like, oh, I think I'm looking to maybe move on to my next project, things that I consider are really like, what is the next thing that I'm looking to do? What is the next vibe that I'm looking to maintain? And by vibe, I mean like, when I walk into the building, do I want chill? Do I want excitement? Do I want fun? Do I want serious? Do I want funny? Do I want mystery? Like, what are the kind of moods that I want to put myself in emotionally when I'm walking into the building? Because one thing that I've noticed recently now is like, I care more about the people who are creating the thing than the thing itself. Yeah. Because I am very passionate and open about mental health, and I'm very, outspoken about like how important that element is when it comes to being in the space, especially when it comes to creating art and creating theater and things like that. And so 9 times out of 10, depending on the job, I'm kind of like, oh, well, this job seems like it would be good for financial reasons and for artistic reasons. But I also really like the creative team, and I like the people that they usually cast because they usually cast really good people who are fun to work with. And this is an environment that this show would be a lot of fun to do. So I could see myself doing it potentially for a year more. Because especially with these kind of bigger production contracts that are like Broadway and tour and stuff like that, you're looking at signing for about a year of your life of just doing that, because most productions want you to be on there for that long. And so those are the kind of things that kind of enter my mind. No one's really ever asked me that before, so that was really kind of interesting to kind of like dive into.
Oh, no. And I appreciate how you put all that. And I guess something that I kind of realized as you were talking is that if you weren't kind of looking and doing these auditions throughout throughout your time of being there, when it finally came time that you were like, you know what, I'm done here. Like, I'm ready to go. You say that to your management and your team, and they're like, no, you haven't put in the work. Like, you haven't. What do you mean you want to go out for auditions? Like, you haven't schmoozed or rubbed elbows with anybody in years.
Sure.
And it's like this kind of just shows, hey, I'm still in this, and yes, I have a great gig right now, but I know that there will be an after Hamilton.
Yeah, and I think that's been the great thing about my relationship to my representation, and I can't speak for other actors, is that it's always been about like, where are you at and are you happy? And there have been times when I've been like, I think I'm ready to move on, or I think I'm ready to go try something else. And there's never been of like, well, but what about Hamilton? Like, that's Hamilton. It's never been that. It's always been you feeling satisfied in that experience. Great, let's go find you a new one. And I think that relationship is really important with your representation, which is, I think, something that a lot of actors or talent who work with representation struggle with, because there's that weird social dynamic of like, who's working for who. And I think that the best terminology that my representation uses is teamwork. Like, it's always, no one's working for anybody. We're working together to make something happen. And we're all putting effort together to like move to another direction if we're moving to another direction. So they get me the audition. I put my share of the work in so that then they have something really decent to work with when it comes to trying to get me the deal or trying to get me in the room so that I can get that kind of thing going. And that's like a whole other part of like this business that you're like trying to navigate, which I'm sure is also like something that you're dealing with in the puppetry world too, of like, trying to figure out like, my relationship to this person is this certain thing, and I got to make sure I do this so that they know, so that they can help me. Almost everything is about relationships. And then going back to my original point, like, anything about what other projects I may want to consider, or if I'm going to ask Ham to give me a leave of absence to go do another project, I want to make sure that it's going to be something that I'm really passionate about for multiple reasons. The people I'm doing it for, who I'm doing it with, and, all that thing. So relationships are kind of like the overarching theme, I would say, in everything that I've said.
What do you hope the legacy of this era of Broadway will be for the next generations and people looking back at this time?
Oh my Lord. I think I hope that people see that we were, because the weird thing about history and the whole weird thing about like legacy and looking back on these things is that we only have it based on what was written about it and not about like what it actually was. And because of that, like, what I don't see being written about is the effort that's being put in. Like, it's not necessarily succeeding. Like, it's still a corporation. It's still, capitalism at its finest. It's still a bunch of people trying to like make money off of the labor of other people. Like, that's just what a lot of this country is, and Broadway is no different from that.
Yeah.
And I actively choose to participate in it because I also benefit from things in it. But I hope the legacy is that people were working their asses off to try to change it, even if it gets to a place where it never changes one day. People behind the lines and in front of the lines and within the theater and outside of the theater and within equity and within non-equity, like, people were working their butts off to try to change. And I think it will change, but on the very slight chance that it doesn't, I hope at the end of the day, the reason it doesn't change is because of the gatekeepers and not because of the people who are within it. That's like the most important thing I want to be said, because every single day I'm having conversations with people about like, how will the industry change? How can the industry change? How can we make it more inclusive? How can we make it more open? Like, every new Broadway show that comes out, it's still a predominantly white cast or white creative team. And how are we are working to try to change that, but there's only so much that can be done, and it's happening slowly, but it's happening. And I would never want it to be thought of that people within it who chose to actively participate in it, because there are a lot of people who chose to actively walk away from it, which is also incredibly respectable. But the people who chose to actively stay in it were working. It was never a matter of like, we're just going to let it keep happening. But it was like, while I'm in it, I'm going to try to make it work the best that I can for any reasons. And I've watched it work in very different ways, and I've watched a lot of different changes happen. But, you know, sometimes those changes because they don't make a big enough splash or because they're not as present or they're not as immediate, which is, I think, something that social media has kind of falsely taught us, that it comes at an immediacy or an urgency. If it doesn't come in that way, then it's not happening, which is not true. But because it's not that big and it's not that quick, sometimes it comes off that it's not happening. And I would never want that narrative to continue forward.
As we wrap up, I just ask a couple last things about how we as an audience can help, things that we could put out into the world to kind of make your life and experiences easier. What's something that you wish audiences had more empathy about towards the actors who they come and see every night on stages?
If an actor says they can't take a picture with you, it's literally not personal. Like, you know, they're and we're often doing it dependent on your like response to us. You know what I mean? Like, if I come out and you have on no mask and you're running up to me asking for a picture, my instinct is going to say, sorry, I won't take a picture with you because I don't believe you have COVID, but I can't take that risk.
No,
and I want to work. I want to make sure that I go to work. And so, you know, like, you know, things like that. And most audiences actually do recognize that. And I also think a lot of people who are sitting in the audience who choose not to have on their mask are like, why do actors care? And it goes back to that thing of like, actors and the people backstage, our entire CSM, which are the COVID safety managers, like, which are now a part of our company. Like, and it's, I mean, at Hamilton, we have like 10 of them. They're a part of our family now, and they work too hard for us to go on stage and see you not care about protocol. And it's definitely more of an emotional thing. I get crazy distracted when I see people not wearing their masks in the audience.
You'd probably rather see someone on their cell phone. Or
honestly, I'm kind of like, you know what, bro, if you're asleep, go off. Like, at least your mask is on.
It's a long show. I get it.
I get it. It's hard. I mean, it's an expensive nap for you, but brother, that's your business. But I think that's a big part of it. And I hope that people can just realize how hard people are working to like make normal life happen again. Like, things that like a lot of people have not taken for granted, but sometimes, you know, the reactions to certain things, it does seem like you're taking for granted. And like how hard people are working just to make that very quote unquote normal experience exist in these times is a lot. And I just hope people can kind of check in with that and tune in and be like, oh my God, yeah, that's I have this drink in my hand, but a person had to come in probably 2 hours earlier than they needed to and do COVID tests and then set up the bar, disinfect the bar, and, you know, all of these different things. Like, there's just extra protection in every regard to what we're doing right now so that you can stay safe and enjoy your evening. You know, just like little different things like that. It's difficult when I have friends who work in the bars of theaters and the merchandise of theaters, and I hear horror stories every day of people who are just terrible to them because they're not aware of how much these people work just to give them a pleasant experience of a night at theater. Like, the fact that we're able to bring it back. And it sounds trivial sometimes, but, you know, what we do in this business is create experiences. And sometimes we're creating those experiences under circumstances where we are unbelievably exhausted and depressed and just scared. And we are facading that with a smile and I hope you have a nice day and a nice evening and enjoy the show so that you can have a nice night. And when that's not reciprocated, or, you know, even worse, it's disrespected, it makes it incredibly difficult to want to come do that job.
No, you're so right. And hopefully people, you know, I imagine most of the people listening to this already get that, but you hope that more people can lead by example and just and just have that kind of empathy.
Absolutely.
What for you is the dream role, and this could be something irrespective of gender, age, race, anything like that. Just the character that you're like, I would love to get on stage and be that.
Oh man. if I could have my way completely and like nothing mattered about it, I probably would want to do like something like a Mama Rose. Like when I was a kid, I really wanted to do like the first drag Mama Rose, like because I think that role
what role or what show?
Oh, that's Gypsy. That's Gypsy.
Okay.
Oh
Okay.
my Lord. Gypsy is such a wonderful show for those who don't know, about a stage mom whose daughter is in vaudeville. But Mama Rose is like a tyrant. Like she is this like, think of like Mother Courage. Like she is just this like force on stage, and she is so hell-bent, almost, you know, damn near abusive to her kids because she is trying to get them to be stars. And specifically, she has two kids, June and Louise. And June is like, you know, if you've heard the song, let me entertain you, let me make you smile, like that's what Baby June sings. And Louise is kind of like the backup, and Louise is kind of, you know, the trope is that June is the beautiful one and Louise is the ugly girl. And what ends up happening is when they get older, June loses her spark and Louise becomes kind of the more successful one. But because of this terrible relationship that Louise and her mom have with each other, there's so much resentment from Louise, and Louise ends up getting into burlesque and stripping, and like it's a pretty like dark story about entertainment, about celebrity, about success, and about like the relationship you have with your parent when your parent is unfulfilled in a specific way and they siphon it through you in a very unhealthy way. I'm saying it like that happens all the time, but that's kind of what this story is, and I think Mama Rose is such a brilliant role because they find a way to like make you hate her for like a whole show, and then she has these like two songs at the end that just really like you see into her mind of how much pain she is in and how much she is suffering and how much she wishes she could have just done what she's always wanted to do. And it's a gloriously written role and a beautiful show. Sondheim wrote the lyrics. I think Jules Verne wrote the music. Don't quote me on that. I know Sondheim wrote the lyrics for sure, but that was the second. Was that the second show? It was West Side and Gypsy that were the first two shows that Sondheim wrote, but they were both just the lyrics, and I can't remember which one was first. I want to say
I think West Side Story was first.
West Side was first. I believe West Side was first,
and it was Jules Stein.
Jules Stein. There we go. That's what I was looking for.
Jules
I said Jules Verne.
Isn't
he write 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea?
I was gonna say, yeah, that's the sci-fi author.
There we go. So Jules Verne, the sci-fi author,
Yes.
wrote Gypsy and the Deep Sea. No, but Jules Stein and Sondheim together wrote Gypsy in 59, I think is when it came out, and I think at 57 or 56 is when West Side came out, and that was with Leonard Bernstein or Bernstein for the music. But anyway, Gypsy is that's just one of those shows that like is so old school and so classic, but I think it's really well done. And when I was a kid, I saw Bette Midler do it on a TV special once, and it just blew my mind. I just thought it was such a well-written role, and there's a great bootleg of it with Imelda Staunton in London, and she was just, I mean, Imelda Staunton was Umbridge in Order of the Phoenix.
Oh gosh,
she was, oh my god, she was a force in that role. And then like my dream like role, which is not technically role like on stage, but like my dream role is kind of what John Tartaglia is doing with Fraggle Rock. Like he I mean, he has been able to do this thing that I think is so incredible, where he is really like a creative force and an executive producer and starring and writing and helping edit, and you know, he has so much creative control over this new Fraggle Rock series, which is paid off because it is absolutely
fucking gorgeous.
Oh my god, it's magnificent. Like I could not have imagined a better tribute and a better update to that show. I am still I still haven't gotten through it because I don't want it to end. It is absolutely like just brilliant. Yeah. It's hilarious. The songs are wonderful. The performances are great all around. Like it's just truly a fantastic show.
I mean, that and The Dark Crystal. Like,
oh my god, Henson's really been on it.
They really, really have, and it's a reboot in the very best kind of way.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I interrupted you because you were talking about
No.
Johnny T.
But you know, I love Johnny. Johnny's such a great human being and a great soul, and I mean the way his graciousness and his gratitude for like what he's doing right now, and it's so clear how hard he's worked. I saw him right after he rapped, because he did a 54 Below show in New York, and I saw him at the show, and I was also like, why are you doing a 54 Below show after you just rapped this thing?
Please go take a nap. We need
I was
you.
like, go sleep. Yeah, exactly. But he was like, you know, he was like, man, it was so hard. It was so crazy. And under COVID, like the strictest of COVID protocols, like before vaccines, like they were, you know, really in the trenches with it. And they just made something absolutely gorgeous and truly magnificent. And that's something I really admire. And it's something I would love to do. I'd love to be able to have as much of a creative footprint in something the way that he has been able to with Fraggle. It's really wonderful.
You and me, we'll work on the next Muppet show together.
That's right. Listen, Disney Plus, give us a call.
Yeah.
Please.
We're so on it. Big ideas.
Make it happen. Oh my gosh.
Boffo big time. So.
Yes.
Fergie, how can people learn more about you and all the work that you do?
Oh, probably Instagram is best. I'm at Fergsters95. That is FERGSTERS95. That's also my @ for Twitter and for TikTok. But Instagram is kind of where all of my rants and my information about what's going on in my life come through. So yeah, join me on there. I'm usually talking about something stupid. I'm usually ranting about something dumb on Instagram.
But the very best kind of stupid and dumb.
It really is. It really is. Only the stupid that we can all agree on.
Right. Fergie, one last thing. I just want to say you have helped me understand and appreciate the entertainment that I love in a much, much deeper way. I think your talent constantly blows us all away, and keep putting on a show for all of us.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Cam. And I could say the same for you, man. You don't know what puppeteers did for me during this pandemic. Seriously. Well, it helped me so much in the darkest of times. So thank you as well.
Absolutely. That means a lot. And glad we had this time together. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yes, of course.
We did it! You came to the end of another episode of This Should Have Been a Phone Call. Thanks so much to Fergie for this conversation, and thank you again for your patience as I've kept it on ice for this long. If this is your first time listening, there are plenty of other episodes of the show. Just go to phonecallpod.com and you could listen to all of them right now. Please give us a follow at phonecallpod wherever you get your social media. And if you're feeling brave, I always appreciate a good review or comment over at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps the show grow, but it also makes every vegetable taste like chocolate. So I definitely appreciate that. We'll see you next time on This Should Have Been a Phone Call. Oh, and one more thing. I love you. You're enough. Keep going.